Hello, everyone. The meaning of religion is best explained when we answer serious questions about it. So, welcome, believers, doubters, and those who are unsure. Today, we're going to answer a question: Is Buddhism a religion? Well, isn't it? Why wouldn't it be? Believe it or not, there are some people who might argue that it isn't. Why would anyone argue that Buddhism is not a religion? Well, because it has these three main ideas. There's no central God in Buddhism, there's no soul, and there's no idea of a permanent self, which it affirms. So with no idea of God, and no idea of the soul, and no idea of a permanent self, what is really left of religion? And this is why some people might think that Buddhism really isn't a formal religion as such. So let's explore these ideas and talk a little bit more about why Buddhism might actually still be a religion. Firstly, Buddhists do not have the idea of a creator God. There is no central God that you pray to in Buddhism. Now, deities don't disappear altogether from Buddhism. Even in the very beginning, when Buddha attained his enlightenment, there is a story that is told of the Hindu god Brahma appearing to him and encouraging him to teach his new religion. But in conventional Buddhist practices and thinking, there's no formal creator God to pray to. So, with this absent, many people say, is it really a religion? Well, I think it is, but let's take a look at the next idea. Buddhists also challenge the idea of the everlasting soul. Now, Hindus accepted this. Hindus believe in a soul or an Atman which reincarnates from one life to the next. Buddhists also believe in reincarnation, but they disbelieved in the Hindu idea of the everlasting soul. Instead of the Atman, Buddhists say Anatman. There is no soul. There is no everlasting soul or self. So, wait a minute. How does that make sense? How can you believe in reincarnation and not believe in a soul? Well, let's try and explain that next. To understand the Buddhist idea of reincarnation, I think you have to resort to an image like this. Here you see a candle passing flame to an unlit candle. So, Buddhists would argue that something is passed from one life to the next, a spiritual energy, but not something so permanent and distinct as the Hindu idea of the soul. Something much more free form and flowing, like this image of the flame passing flame from a lit candle to an unlit candle. So karma, or spiritual energy, is passed from one life to the next. But it is not as permanent and distinct as the Hindu idea of the soul. That's the way the Buddhists have argued, and they've called it by various names such as the subtle self or Pudgala. But there is some spiritual karma that reincarnates. Buddhists have also challenged the conventional idea of the self. Now you may say, what? Didn't Descartes prove that by saying, I think, therefore I am? Well, the Buddhists would come at that from a very different angle, in a very different direction. Now here, the Buddhist monk Nagasena explained this to a Greek king once. He said that there's no permanent self, just as there's no permanent chariot. So he pointed to the king's chariot and he said, well, your chariot is made of wheels, axle, platform, walls, and a yoke. But there's no permanent essence of the chariot. You take one away and you have non-chariot. And indeed, the whole chariot itself was made from a tree. It was wood that was cut down, carved up, reformed into a chariot. At some point, the chariot will no longer be. It will decompose. It will fall apart. So Nagasena also argues that human beings are composed of 5 aggregates. And this is conventional Buddhist thinking that there are 5 aspects of our conscious self. We do have material form, we have brains, we have feelings and sensations which can occur to those brains, and we have perceptions that can register in our minds, such as light or darkness or hot or cold. We have mental formations, ideas that can occur in our mind, and we have a consciousness that is awake and alert. But we are nothing more than the 5 parts of these 5 aggregates when we pass away, so there will be no permanent self, because we are always changing, we are always adapting, and there is no permanent everlasting self. Now that still may be a difficult idea to accept, and you may say, well, with no soul and no self, I still don't get what reincarnates. Now here, think of this. What does pass along is not the chariot, but the idea of the chariot. From one generation to the next, people know how to make chariots, and chariots are still made. So you might say in the Buddhist conception, it is something more soft that is passed along from one life to the next, some sort of karma or some sort of spiritual repercussion, some sort of spiritual energy that is passed from one life to the next. But it is not as permanent and distinct as the soul or the self. Now, this idea is still pretty difficult to wrap your head around, and you don't have to accept it, but I'm just trying to explain conventional Buddhist thinking. Now, a Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, explained this well with the idea of interbeing. You have the image of a piece of paper and a tree here. Thich Nhat Hanh would argue that they interbe, or they inter-are, and they are connected with the idea of a cloud. How is that? Well, here's a wonderful description which he gives. Thich Nhat Hanh writes about interbeing, "If you are a poet, you will see clearly that there is a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. Without a cloud, there will be no rain. Without rain, the trees cannot grow, and without trees, we cannot make paper. The cloud is essential for the paper to exist. If the cloud is not there, the sheet of paper cannot be here either. So we can say that the cloud and the paper inter-are." Now, that's a fascinating idea, which I think explains the Buddhist notion fairly clearly. There is no permanent and distinct self because it is connected to everything around it. So in a way, the self never really disappears, but is always changing and subtly altering. Like that flame, it can have a spiritual momentum that it passes to the next generation. So those are the conventional ideas. That there is in Buddhism no idea of God, no central idea of a soul or self, and many will still ask what is left of religion. Can this thing really be a religion? Can Buddhism be a religious faith? And I think the answer is yes, it does qualify as a religion, but why is that? Simply because of the idea of reincarnation. As difficult as it may be to wrap your head around the Buddhist notion of it, there is some sort of spiritual energy which passes from one life to the next. Even if you use the image as soft as that candle passing flame to an unlit candle, that is the image that Buddhism has. So we have spiritual cause and consequence which can be passed to the next generation. And we can escape. We can attain nirvana and freedom from all of life's woes and difficulties if we practice the Buddhist forms of meditation, which I've done other videos about if you're interested in that. So I think Buddhism is a religion, very clearly, but it does depend on this idea of reincarnation, of spiritual cause and consequence, which transpires from one life to the next. So that's the video on Is Buddhism a Religion? And the answer is yes, but not in the way that most conventionally people would think. So these videos take time to make, and I hope you like them and you understand them. Please subscribe to this video. And if you're interested further in my books, my first book is Gandhi and Bin Laden, Religion at the Extremes, and I've also written a book, Making Sense of the Sacred, and I have other books which I hope may be coming out. You can also take a look at some of my writings at my website, themeaningofreligion.com, or you can read some of my articles at providencemagazine.com. Thanks again for listening. Please like and subscribe, and look forward to the next video.